3:3. For he shall return to refine and purify the people like silver, and he shall cleanse the sons of Levi and purge them like gold and silver, that they may offer to the Lord an offering in righteousness. That speaks about God as the refiner and purifier of silver, but it's actually referring to the sons of Levi and their righteousness. That's what they're talking about. One member of the group wondered if that particular verse could give some insight into the nature and character of God, thereby giving us some insight as to how that relates to our self-worth. The other class members were intrigued by that idea, and the question of how silver was actually refined was asked, but nobody actually knew how to do that. So one of the women agreed to go to a silversmith and find out what the process entailed, and she reported back to the class. She made an appointment with the silversmith, who agreed to let her watch him work. He's like, okay, cool, no problem. She didn't mention the reason of her interest besides the curiosity about the process of refining the silver. And so as she watched the silversmith, he held a piece of silver ore in the fire and he let it heat up. He explained that when refining the silver, you had to hold that piece of ore in the middle of the flame where the flame was the hottest until all the impurities had burned off. Now, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I know for me personally, I know that sometimes we feel like we're sitting in the middle of the flame, especially when all heck is broken out in your life and you got chaos all around you. It's just what we do because we're functioning on the physical realm. You know, it would be wonderful to say that we live in that nirvana all the time, or that we're balanced all the time. If we were, we wouldn't be here. We would have returned back to the spirit realm. But because we're here learning, we have those days when we're getting hit left, right, up, and down. But the key is not about the situation, but how you handle it. You've got the tools to work with. Are you using them? That's what becomes important during those times. So when you're in this chaos and when you've got things going on around you, one of the first things we have a tendency to ask is God still here? Does he hear me? Has he deserted me? Am I alone in my dark night of the soul? What's going on? That woman thought about those very questions, about how God sometimes lets us be in those hot spots. Lets us be there. So the term trial by fire takes on a whole new meaning, because sometimes that's what it is. She asked the silversmith if he had to sit in front of the fire the whole time that the ore was being refined, and he answered, oh, yeah. Not only do I have to sit here holding the ore, I have to keep my eye on it at all times while it's in the flame, for if I leave it in for a moment too long, it's utterly destroyed. Totally demolished. The woman was silent for a moment. She said, so how do you know when the silver is perfectly refined? And he said, oh, that's simple. When I can see my reflection in it. When our Father can see his reflection in us, he knows we're refined just perfectly at that moment. Our individual lives, our learning experiences are like that piece of ore. They're full of impurities and tarnish, our false perceptions, our feelings of separation from God and from one another, standing in judgment of one another. You know, we let things fly out of our head just without even thinking. Stuff flying out of our mouth that would have better been in here or better not in there in the first place. And we call ourselves metaphysicians. We call ourselves Christians, Christian scientists, ascended masters, they're here on the earth. All kinds of craziness we call ourselves. Our trials are like the flame of the silversmith, but make no mistake, God's always there. Always there, watching and waiting for that perfect moment to take us out of the flame. He doesn't leave us there and keep us there. He knows when to pull us out. When we finally realize we have no control over anything, because you guys, you know you don't have any control over anything. You guys know that, right? You guys know that. You guys got that. All right. When you finally realize you don't have control of anything, you drop to your knees. What do? You look up. Because you have to. You have to surrender. Once you do that, then all the impurities can fall away. There's a minister that I know that said it so perfectly, and I think about this so much. She said, when life hits you in the gut or cracks you in the knees and drops you, make sure you fall on your back. Because if you fall on your face, you can't see where you're going. You fall on your back, you see exactly how far you need to go. Okay? So if you're going to fall on your back. Don't fall on your face. So you know where you're going. You're just eating dirt, can't see anything. I'll never forget when she said that. Never forget when she said that. But anyway, your self-worth has already been established. It's always been established. God does care for us. He wouldn't keep returning us to that flame, because that's a purifying flame. That's why we keep having to go back there. The flame is the renewal of the mind thing that we got going on. Okay? Because as you become spiritually growing, as you spiritually grow, your old way of thinking doesn't work for you anymore. Have you guys noticed that? As you grow spiritually, what you thought you knew or what you thought worked for you just doesn't seem to click anymore. It's like, what was I thinking about? As you grow, your thinking process grows with you. And you have to get rid of some of those old thoughts because they don't work anymore. That's what that flame does. It gets us to the right thinking, walking on the path. Now remember that the path of least resistance isn't always the best path. And they say, well, don't resist, just go with the flow. Sometimes the path of least resistance is not the best path. And that's where using your discernment comes in it. You know, we return multiple times to the fire because we live life. We have life going on. And we're constantly getting retarnished. And impurities are constantly getting into our auric field. And it has to be burned off again and again. And that's okay. We belong to God. Each one of you belongs to Him. Know who and whose you are. If you don't know anything else, you know that you're a child of God. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you did for a living, what you're doing for a living, your race, ethnic background, sexual orientation. I don't care. Remember who and whose you are. So you have to understand that God has a greater capacity to love than we can ever conceive. We can't even begin to understand His capacity to love us. And that's why He keeps returning us to the fire. The renewing of your mind is a continual process, and the sense of your self-worth goes hand in hand with the renewal of your mind. You see the connection between the two? It goes hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. We must constantly be renewed in the spirit of our mind, because as we mature, as I said, spiritually, then things don't start to work for us anymore. Isaiah 55:8 tells us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord." That's why we have to grow. That's why we have to grow. You and I have a very important part in our spiritual growth. Our minds don't need to be troubled or tormented by the lies of the dark side. Ego, whatever you used to call it. Devil, Satan, boogeyman, whatever. Okay? We don't need to go there. That's all an illusion. You know that. We have a choice in life. Instead of thinking about defeat and failure, we can choose to elevate our thinking and follow God's plan for our spiritual life. It's up to you. Because I can't walk your path for you. I can't kick you in the shin and say, you need to get on up and do what you got to do. Can't do that. Only you can do that for you. So if you're feeling the heat in your fire, the heat of the fire in your life, know that God is on the job, burning off those impurities and helping you to return that state of refined silver so that you can reflect His image in your life, so that those on the outside, that's what they see. But it's not about you. It's about the edification of our Creator. I love my life. I love living this kind of life. I love living the blessed